Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Alex and today I'm going to be doing a review for the sequel to The Three-Body Problem, The Dark Forest by Cixin Liu. If you missed my review for The Three-Body Problem, you can check that out here. I don't want to spoil anything for you if you have an intention to read the first book, so you might want to go ahead and click off now, because in order for me to give you a synopsis of this book, I have to reveal what happened at the end of the last one. The Dark Forest kicks off with all of Earth now knowing of the Trilogy threat and the fact that they are going to show up in 400 years. Together, humanity must try to advance their technology as far as possible without having access to anything in the quantum realm, thanks to the Sophons. The Sophons are floating around in the air at all times. They hear and see everything and always relay it to the Trilogy, so humanity comes up with a scheme. What is the only thing that a Sophon can't penetrate? The human mind. And the Wallfacer program is born. There are 4 Wallfacers chosen from around the globe, and they essentially are in charge of coming up with an elaborate plot. And they don't have to tell anybody what their plot is, and they have access to all of humanity's resources. But of course, the ETO still exists, and they want to stop the Wallfacer project, so 3 of the 4 Wallfacers are assigned a wall breaker. But one, in particular, Luo, isn't assigned one because the Trilogy just want him dead. Now, if that sounded like a lot, it absolutely was, and in truth, overall, I thought that this premise was a great one. I was so excited to read The Dark Forest because, again, if you saw my review for The Three-Body Problem, then you know that I gave the first book 5 stars. Unfortunately, when I got into The Dark Forest, it did not turn out to be what I thought that it would. This book seemed to be quite divisive for readers. A lot of people said that it was either better than the first book or that they really disliked it. My opinion of it is quite nuanced, so I'm going to get into that. The mystery of the first book went from this journey with the main characters where we were learning things at the same time as them to now the characters themselves are the mystery. We don't know about their motivations. We have to wait to hear what it is that they're thinking. The characters are kind of an enigma, and Luo in particular is not a really likable character, and he doesn't seem to take his job very seriously for a large chunk of the book. And to be honest with you, I also found him kind of creepy at times, just saying. In the same vein, I would describe The Three-Body Problem as the book of discovery. We are discovering the Trilogy and how they learned about us and we learned about them, and that's really exciting. To now, The Dark Forest felt more like the book of planning. We now know that they're coming, so we have to try to prepare for it as best we can, and planning is not always sexy. There are some really good moments of deception in the book, I will give credit there, and I was extremely happy to see that Da Shi, who is my favorite character from the first book, made a reappearance. He's actually the only character who went from the first book into this one. Everybody else is a new character. I don't know if that's because he was a favorite of Cixin Liu as well, but he was definitely my favorite, as at times he seemed to be the only one that had any amount of sense. The Dark Forest feels like more philosophy than realistic hard sci-fi because we've kind of entered the realm of absurdity. Throughout the entirety of The Three-Body Problem, I knew that there were some areas that I had to suspend my belief a little bit. I had to be willing to accept that it's a sci-fi novel because, again, we're talking about having contact with aliens and communicating with them over great distances, and obviously that's not something that we have done already, but it seemed like Cixin Liu was focused on looking at technology that humanity already has access to and incorporating that into his book, which I found compelling. It was one of the things I loved the most about that story. On the other hand, by the time we get to The Dark Forest, I realized that he was moving well past what humanity actually has access to, because suddenly we have the ability to have people hibernate for centuries in the future, even though obviously that's not something that we can do right now. And then we have a massive time jump where we're also going 200 years in the future, and then the world looks very different. All of a sudden there's this new technology that nobody's ever seen or heard of, and it felt like just a completely different story. It felt like a completely different world to me. It was so jarring that I knew that there was going to be a rug that got pulled out from under me. And if you have read this story, then you probably know what I'm talking about, but if you don't, I will be getting to that in the spoiler section later on. And don't get me wrong, I enjoy futuristic sci-fi. That's one of my favorites. I love technology that's advanced. I love alien races. I love things that aren't necessarily realistic, but that wasn't the foundation of this trilogy, like from the first book, and I think that's part of the reason why I was a little bit disappointed with the direction that the story went in. The Dark Forest also felt a lot slower than the Three-Body Problem, and I'm sure that there are people who would wholeheartedly disagree with that. And if this book went by fast for you, I love that. I wish that it had gone fast for me, because it only took me 4 days to read the Three-Body Problem. This took me 2 weeks. So my motivation to get through it, even though it was only 125 pages longer than the first book, it just wasn't there. I was not having as good of a time in this story, and that was just such a bummer. Everything about this was just so different in tone and concept and execution. I know that the translator for this one was a different person. I don't know if that had any sort of great impact on why the book feels so different. Maybe it did. Maybe it doesn't have any effect on it at all. I have no idea. But the greatest gripe by far that I had with the Dark Forest was the Sherlock Holmes, Batman's Gambit, 4D chess bullshit. When I say that this is absurd, I mean it takes some liberties. Sherlock Holmes is mentioned twice, and this, no joke, feels like a sci-fi Arthur Conan Doyle. And I'll talk about that more in the spoiler section as well, but if you can't stay through the spoiler section, just think about why that might be. And that's all that I'm gonna say. I'm also going to tell you some things I liked about the story, though, because my intention with this review is not just to rag on it. Again, this is supposed to be a nuanced review. I like that Cixin Liu is in it for the long con. This man will introduce something at the beginning of the book, and he will carry it most of the way throughout. And that's something that I like. I enjoyed the Dark Forest theory and the way that he kind of turned it on its head a little bit. I thought that that was quite fascinating. The expansion to look at multiple character perspectives instead of just having a couple people that we bounce back and forth between was really cool. I like books with a lot of moving parts. It makes me feel like my brain is fully engaged when I have to keep track of like how people are tied together and what they're thinking about and what their motivations are. That's usually great, so I didn't have an issue with that at all. Overall, I didn't hate this book. I didn't think it was as good as the first one, but there were some good moments in here. So overall, I ended up giving The Dark Forest 3.5 stars. And now I'm going to head into the spoiler territory. So if you can't stay for that, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you. I'm not going to have any sort of background change the way that I used to. I'm just going to dive into it. So go ahead and click off now because I'm going in 3, 2, 1. And if you are still here, then that means that you have either already read The Dark Forest or you just don't give a damn about spoilers. But either way, the first thing that I want to talk about is the Sherlock Holmes thing. The fact that the wall breakers just materialize and start expositing for many paragraphs about the long and convoluted plan that their wall facer had all along felt entirely too much like Arthur Conan Doyle for comfort. Here's the thing, Sherlock Holmes and Agatha Christie stories both are a ton of fun, but they are also very unrealistic. Sherlock Holmes is always operating with more information than the reader has, and that's the reason why he can make these large leaps in logic that sound plausible. The second that he starts trying to explain stuff, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes perfect sense. But if you took the time to break down his deductions into little pieces, you would recognize that they actually don't make a whole lot of sense. Or at the very least that there's quite a few gaps. I actually talked about this with my partner Keaton, and he brought up Batman's Gambit. And if you're not familiar with Batman's Gambit, I will explain it to you. It's listed on the website TV Tropes, which is a really cool website actually. You should go check it out if you haven't ever heard of it. But Batman's Gambit is essentially where Batman allows the villains to do all of these things because he's always one step ahead of them. He has like a psychic level ability to predict whatever it is that they're going to do. And I'm personally not a big fan of things like that because it can be kind of cheap at times. Now, the book had some really cool reveals and I loved the ideas that were presented in here, but again, they just really were not realistic with the ways in which those ideas were told to us. For my comment earlier about technology advancing beyond what I thought humans would actually be able to accomplish, what annoyed me about that was we have all these characters who go into hibernation, they go to sleep, and they wake up 200 years in the future. And those people in that time tell them immediately, oh yeah, we've cured every disease, the economy's great, there's endless power, and oh yeah, we built this massive 1,000-ship naval fleet that'll easily be able to demolish the Trisolarans. Don't even worry about it. Well, here's the thing. If we don't worry about it, there's no plot. So Cixin Liu completely reveals his hand that obviously the military is going to be decimated in some way. The Trisolarans are going to do something to reveal that humanity isn't actually as powerful as they think that they are. And what happens? Oh yeah, this probe shows up and destroys all but 2 of the 1,000 naval ships that they have. Did that come as a surprise at all? No, it didn't. And that, I think, is probably what bothered me a lot as well, is in the first book, Cixin Liu kept his cards very close to his chest. He wasn't revealing a whole lot to the reader, but in this book, it felt like he was revealing entirely too much too early. And I don't like to see things coming. That's just not fun for me. I don't like to be able to predict what's going to happen in a book because then I'm asking, why am I reading it? It was just so bizarre to me that he made that choice. The Battle of Darkness thing where the humans stop acting like humans like the second that they get out into space and they realize that they can't turn around and go back to Earth. I had a really hard time determining whether Cixin Liu thinks highly of humanity or thinks very little of us for our survival instincts. And maybe humans just basically going crazy out in space and killing each other is realistic. I have no idea, but it's definitely a pessimistic look at the way that humans would behave and completely undermines the message of hope that was in the first book. It kind of felt to me like Cixin Liu was saying that humans are clever and we're calculating and we're practical, but we're also harsh and exacting, which honestly is quite true, but it made me miss the warmth of a Becky Chambers book. To the author's credit though, I will say that I recognize that in any trilogy, it doesn't matter whether it's a book trilogy or a movie trilogy, usually the middle book or the middle act is the darkest one. So I fully expect that that's the case for this book as well. But here's what is so strange about this story is, to me, with the ending, it felt like a duology. It felt like this could have been an end cap on the story, and there are probably going to be people who disagree with that too, and that's totally okay. But for me, if the book had ended here, if this duology had ended here, I would have fully accepted that because I thought that it had a nice little bow on it, which made me then question, where the hell are we going to go from here? What is Death's End going to be about? And I do plan to read that in April, so wish me luck. I'm hoping that I enjoy it more than I enjoyed this. This is the last thing that I'm going to say about this book, and it's with regards to the Dark Forest theory. What I had hoped was going to happen in this story was that Luoqi was going to recognize that there was other life out in the universe, and we were going to find some other way to contact an alien civilization that was even more advanced than the Trisolarans and say, hey, we need help. And then that civilization was going to fly to Earth, and there was going to be some sort of epic battle between the races. Or maybe instead we put another call out saying like, hey, come to our planet, we're easy to demolish, and there were going to be 2 races of equal strength. Now the Trisolarans and some other group that were going to battle it out for control of Earth. I thought that that would be a really cool idea. But instead, we got extortion. Our main character said, well, the only way that we can prevent Earth from being taken over is to annihilate all of us. So he tells the Trisolarans, if you come here, I am going to signal to the rest of the universe that we all exist, and then we're all going to be blown up together and we're all going to die. So don't come to Earth. Which, to be fair, is clever. I mean, it was a good ending to the book. It just wasn't what I was expecting, and that's okay. It's okay for it not to be what I thought that it would be, but it also made it feel kind of anticlimactic. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I really hope that you enjoyed this review. If you have read The Dark Forest, please let me know down in the comments what you thought of it, whether you loved it or you didn't like it at all. And if we have differing opinions on some stuff, be sure to let me know that as well, because I'm always open to hearing other people's feedback. And as always, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or evening, that you all stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time.